A Jewish agency was also offering assistance to get the family of 4 deaf people and 1 elderly hearing woman out of Austria before the gate closed. For their passports, Jewish people were photographed in profile in the Nazis' effort to document racial characteristics such as ear and nose size for identification. Jewish women were all given the middle name of Sarah, and Jewish men were given the middle name of Israel.
Now, my area was in the process of becoming a ghetto, which means that all the Jewish people were being condensed into one particular area. Our area was called District 2. I believe it was District 2. Now, we lived in a fairly small place. I don't remember it, but I've seen pictures of the apartment, and if you looked at it, you realize it was a very small place to live. I really had no idea at the time because I was small, but it wasn't a really big building, and it's still there, actually. It's still standing. It didn't matter to the Nazis at all how much room you had. They moved the 5 of us into one of the rooms in our apartment. I remember we had all our beds in one room, and we were so squeezed and crammed together. They had our beds, our sofa, our chairs, everything in one room. There was a kitchen down the hall, but all of our living arrangements had to be crammed into this one small room, which would then leave our other room available for another family to occupy, somebody we didn't even know. So one night my grandmother heard this pounding, and the lights were flashing, and she looked out the window, and all the lights were flashing everywhere. Very, very noisy. And somebody was pounding on all the buildings and all the doors of our building. And she looked through the window and was just terrified because she saw that these raids were happening that night. And finally realized that they were going to definitely be making one of these nocturnal visits to our home. The door was pounded, and she opened it. And there were no questions that you could ask. They would just move you right out of the side and begin their inspection of your house willy-nilly. And I remember I took it all in stride because I didn't think anything of it. I didn't understand it. But my sister was a little girl who had sort of treasures and secrets. She had like a little compartment where she kept her junk, you know, her little trinkets and things that a little girl might have, her private effects. So she was guarding her treasures, and she tried to hide them. I don't know why she did that. It just drew attention to it. But then the SS guy moved her out of the way and opened it and just found it was junk. And it was no big deal. And my mother, her heart had been racing and her knees had been knocking, and she was so scared. So they rifled through everything in the house, and then an interesting thing occurred. One of the SS officers' eyes met my uncle's across the room. And he said, "Let me see your papers." The papers indicated that we had been born in Vienna. But as for the other family, who was from Poland, they were deported immediately and sent to a concentration camp. He looked at my uncle's papers. We'd been born in Austria, thank God, because that's what saved us. And his eyes met my uncle's across the room, and there seemed to be some sort of important communication happening between the two of them, because then he said, "That's all right, there's nothing here, let's go. We can leave now." So they took off, just from that communication that happened across the room between them. So as soon as they left, my mother asked my uncle, "What's going on?" And he said, "Well, we know each other. We used to work as tailors together. And now he's joined the Nazis. He's moved up in the world. I don't know. But it's strange when his whole affect changed as soon as he saw my uncle, and he realized that he knew him. He knew he was deaf, and he knew he'd worked with him before. He'd been mean, and then all of a sudden, he totally changed his affect. And then he took his cronies out the door, and they left. And that really saved us. So during that time, my mother realized that we had to make plans about where to go. First choice was America, definitely. But if things didn't work out, maybe we could emigrate to England. Many people were emigrating to England at the time, becoming cooks or maids, cleaning houses, being domestics. And the two of us, my sister and I, could go to school, of course. That was her intention. But first and foremost, she wanted America. If America and England didn't work out, then she thought we could apply for asylum in Israel. So we got all the paperwork, and everything was all set. And I'm remembering this because my mother explained it to me. She said that we needed to get my father to sign a release so that we would be able to go and leave Austria. And I have to forgive my mother in retrospect, but she lied to my father and told him we were going to England. So my father said, "Are you going to go to America?" And my mother said, No. We're not going to America. We're either going to go to England or Israel. I do remember that the time was approaching when we would be ready to leave. and it was time to get my father to sign these consent papers. And so we met him halfway on the street somewhere. I remember this clearly. And my father came up to us, and he was signing. And I was shy. I was hanging on to my mother's skirts. I was hiding. But my sister was more bold, and she actually had a conversation with him. And my mother was cold and brusque and businesslike during the whole encounter. And that was the last time I saw him.